In a world that often dismisses the elderly, what happens when a seemingly fragile woman holds a secret that could topple a legacy of greed? Elizabeth's story is a powerful testament to the strength found in quiet dignity and the enduring power of love. After a lifetime of sacrifice, she finds herself in a legal battle against her own daughter and son-in-law, who see her not as a mother, but as an obstacle to their ambitions. What they don't know is that her late husband, William, foresaw this moment and left her more than a simple house. He left her an empire built on love, foresight, and a profound desire to protect her. Now, standing in a courtroom where her family expects her to surrender, Elizabeth is about to reveal a truth that will change everything. She is no longer the gentle, quiet widow they remember. The same hands that baked pies and tended to her husband's flowers are now holding a key to a fortune and a secret that will dismantle their entire plan. This isn't just a story about a house, it's a story about a woman reclaiming her power, a family learning a hard lesson, and the unexpected ways that the past can rise to shape the future. When I stepped into that courtroom, my daughter Emily rolled her eyes and leaned toward her husband James, whispering something that made them both smirk. They thought I was an old woman clinging to a house they could easily take from me. But then something unexpected happened. The judge lifted his head from his stack of papers, his eyes locking on me. His expression froze as if the past had walked right into the room. "It's her," he said in a hushed voice, barely audible. The entire courtroom went silent. Lawyers paused mid-sentence. The clerk stopped typing. Even the bailiff shifted nervously. Emily's smug look wavered and James frowned with confusion. They had no idea what those two words meant, but I did. I had lived long enough to recognize when fate was about to turn. They thought I was just an old woman, frail and weak. They believed they had stripped me of every ounce of dignity. What they never realized was that I carried a story much older, much stronger than their greed. Every morning in Riverton began the same way for me. I rose at 6:00 a.m., filled my old kettle with water, and reached for the chipped blue mug that had survived more than 20 years of breakfasts. The smell of fresh coffee filled the kitchen while I checked on the African violets lined up on the windowsill. My late husband, William, loved those flowers, and tending to them kept him close to me even after he was gone. My life wasn't extraordinary. It was a rhythm of small habits, each one a thread in the fabric of my quiet, content existence. My greatest work was always Emily. She was the one thing William and I had always wanted. After he passed, I put everything I had into giving her a life better than my own. I worked late nights cleaning offices, scrubbing floors, and polishing windows. During the day, I baked and sold pies to the local diner, each one made with love and a silent prayer for her future. I sacrificed my youth and my own ambitions so she would never have to. Emily went to college, married a charismatic, ambitious man named James, and moved to the big city. I was proud of her, even when she seemed to forget the small-town life she came from. The calls became less frequent, and the conversations became shorter. When they did call, it was to complain about their financial struggles, about the pressures of their jobs, and about how difficult life was. The last time Emily came to visit, she kept talking about how a friend of hers had put their parent in a retirement community. It's for their own good, she'd say, so they can be around people their own age and have someone to look after them. The words felt like a warning, a subtle test of my reaction. I pretended not to notice the glint in James's eyes. Then came the formal letter, delivered by a lawyer I had never met. They wanted me to sign a power of attorney document that would allow them to manage my assets and sell the house. They said it was for my own good, claiming I was no longer capable of taking care of myself. They insisted that the retirement community was a wonderful place with a beautiful garden and plenty of activities. When I refused, they threatened to have me declared mentally incompetent, claiming they could prove I was a danger to myself. The betrayal was a heavy blow. This was not the daughter I had raised. This was a stranger, blinded by greed and influenced by her equally greedy husband. I stood my ground, but the pressure was immense. They sent me text messages with pictures of the retirement home and brochures for new furniture. I felt helpless and alone, fighting a battle for my dignity and for my memories. I knew I couldn't give up. The house was more than just a place to live. It was a testament to William's love and a physical record of the life we had built together. I wouldn't let them take that. A few days later, while searching through William's old desk for a document, my hand brushed against a slim, leather-bound folder with a small, intricate lock. I had never seen it before. For years, I had thought I knew everything about William, but here was a piece of him I didn't know. The folder was heavy, filled with secrets. I remembered his fondness for mystery novels and how he would hide important things in plain sight. I went to his favorite bookcase, a towering oak shelf filled with his cherished books on finance and history. His favorite was a worn copy of The Intelligent Investor, its spine cracked from years of use. I ran my fingers along its edge, and that's when I felt it, a small, cool piece of metal taped to the back. It was the key. My heart pounded in my chest as I inserted the key into the lock. The folder sprang open, revealing a meticulously organized stack of documents. The first was his last will and testament, but it wasn't the simple one I had signed. This was a new one, dated just a month before his death. It confirmed my ownership of the house, but went on to list dozens of other properties, including apartments, warehouses, and even a small strip mall. He hadn't just left me a house, he had built an empire, quietly and methodically. I was a millionaire, and I had no idea. I looked at the documents in stunned silence, a sense of disbelief washing over me. There were account numbers, stock certificates, and business registrations, all in my name. The building Emily and James were living in was one of them. They had been paying rent to a management company that funneled the money directly to me. I had been their landlord all along. At the bottom of the folder, beneath the stacks of paper and legal forms, was a letter from William, written in his familiar flowing handwriting. My dearest Elizabeth, if you're reading this, it means you've stumbled upon my little secret. I've always known you to be strong, but I wanted to make sure you were also secure. It's not a lot, but I've been investing for decades, just little by little, to make sure you would always be cared for. I never fully trusted James. He always seemed to have a hunger for things he hadn't earned. I wanted to make sure you had a safety net, a way to stand on your own 2 feet if you ever had to. Use this power not to hurt, but to teach. The greatest victory is not in winning, but in showing others the path to something better. Now, go and show them what true strength looks like. All my love, William. The letter was a balm to my aching heart. He had seen it. He had known, and he had protected me. The tears that fell were not of sorrow, but of profound gratitude. I looked at the documents again, a new kind of confidence rising within me. The fragile old woman they thought I was no more. A new woman, a woman with a purpose, had taken her place, and now I was ready to face them. I walked back into the courtroom, not as a helpless old woman, but as a silent force. James was in the middle of a grand speech, gesturing wildly, his voice filled with feigned concern. We just want what's best for Elizabeth. This is about her well-being, not about the house. The house is a liability for her. We are a family and we want to help her in her old age, he said, and I almost laughed. His words were a performance, and the judge, whom I now knew by his full name, Judge Arthur P. Thompson, looked at him with an expression I can only describe as amused contempt. Judge Thompson had presided over my husband's and my quiet triumphs for years, the legal paperwork for his property acquisitions and trusts. The look in his eyes told me he knew everything I did, and more. The court will hear from Mrs. Elizabeth Williams, Judge Thompson announced, his voice firm and clear, cutting through James's monologue. Emily's head snapped toward me, a flash of annoyance on her face. Now? But my husband wasn't finished, she protested. He's finished, the judge said simply, a hint of steel in his voice. I rose slowly and walked to the stand. The room, which had seemed so big and intimidating before, now felt like a stage. I looked at Emily, her face twisted in a mask of frustration and anger. I looked at James, his face pale and bewildered. I took a deep breath and began to speak, my voice steady, my words carefully chosen. I spoke not of my feelings of betrayal, but of William's careful, quiet plans. I spoke of the documents and the letter. I presented them to the judge, who took them and read each one slowly. As he read, I could see the color draining from Emily and James's faces. "So you're telling the court," Judge Thompson began, his voice low and serious, "that not only is this house not for sale, but the property you live in, the one you've been paying rent on, is in fact owned by Mrs. the Sebony." "Williams?" he asked James. James sputtered, his eyes darting between me and his lawyer. That's impossible. We've been paying the rent to a management company for years." I nodded. "Yes. A management company that funneled your rent to me. My husband set it up that way." The judge looked at Emily and James, a glimmer of satisfaction in his eyes. "You have been trying to steal a house from a woman who owns your home, and more," he said. The courtroom was in an uproar. Emily, in a flash of rage, stood up and shouted, "This is not fair. This is a trick. How could you do this to us, Mother?" "I didn't do this to you," I said calmly. "You did this to yourselves. All I wanted was to keep my home. You were the ones who wanted to declare me incompetent. You were the ones who wanted to sell my home out from under me." Then Judge Thompson made a final announcement that left Emily and James speechless. "Mr. James and Mrs. Emily, since this case has gone on, your family home has been in receivership. Therefore, because of your criminal intent to defraud, all rent payments for the next 2 years will be paid to the court, and then the money will go to Elizabeth." "2 years?" Emily cried. "We can't afford that." "That's something you should have thought about before trying to declare your own mother mentally incompetent," I replied. The judge slammed his gavel down. "Case dismissed. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, please come to my chamber to sign the official documents and discuss the legal consequences of your actions." As they stumbled out of the courtroom, I knew this wasn't about vengeance. It was about justice, about standing up for myself and for my husband's legacy. It was about showing them that my worth wasn't measured by my age or by the size of my home. It was measured by my strength, my dignity, and the love of a man who protected me even after his death. I walked out of the courthouse, the setting sun warming my face. I felt a sense of peace and a newfound purpose. I had protected my home and William's legacy, and in doing so, I had reclaimed myself. The old woman they thought was fragile and weak was gone, replaced by a woman who had found her strength not in money, but in standing her ground. I didn't want to hurt them, and I never did. Instead, I taught them that greed and entitlement had consequences. I hoped that one day they would learn from this experience and find their own way. My journey wasn't over. It had just begun. The courtroom's doors swung shut behind me, silencing the echoes of my daughter's outraged protests. Outside, the world was a canvas of orange and pink as the sun began its descent. The air felt lighter, the burden I'd carried for so long finally lifted. I felt a sense of peace, a profound, quiet calm that had eluded me for months. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, about standing up for myself and, in a way, for William's legacy. It was about showing them that my worth wasn't measured by my age or the size of my bank account. It was measured by my strength, my dignity, and the quiet, enduring love of a man who had protected me even after his death. In the days that followed, I returned to my quiet life in Riverton, but everything felt different. The coffee in my old chipped blue mug tasted sweeter, the scent of the African violets on my windowsill was more vibrant, and the silence in the house was no longer lonely. It was a comfortable quiet, filled with the warmth of my memories. Emily and James were left to face the consequences of their actions. The news of the court's decision traveled fast through the small town, and the local paper even ran a small story about the unusual ruling that put their home's rent payments into receivership. My phone, once filled with their angry messages, fell silent. I learned later that they sold their luxury cars and canceled their extravagant vacations to keep up with the payments. They lost their friends, and their carefully constructed lives began to crumble. Emily called a few times, her voice no longer demanding but hesitant, even pleading. She asked for my forgiveness and tried to explain that they had just been stressed and worried about my future. I listened, but I knew the truth. One day she called and asked if I would let them off the hook. I could hear the desperation in her voice. I gently but firmly refused. "I didn't do this to you, Emily," I said. "You did this to yourselves. This isn't a punishment from me. It's a consequence of your choices. The best thing you can do now is learn from it." And so they did. 2 years passed, and their rent payments to the court finally ended. I heard they were living a simpler life. They had sold their expensive apartment and moved into a smaller one, a choice they made on their own. They started working, not to buy luxuries, but to pay for their daily expenses. James began to work as a plumber, and Emily started her own small business baking pies, just like I had. I watched from afar, and I hoped that one day they would understand that the dignity they lost in the courtroom could only be found through hard work and honesty. I learned that William's letter was right. The greatest victory was not in winning the battle, but in showing them a better path. I didn't want to hurt them, and I never did. Instead, I taught them that greed and entitlement have consequences, and that true wealth is not in a house or a bank account, but in the lessons we learn along the way. My journey wasn't over. It had just begun. The quiet, gentle life I had built with William was now a foundation for something new. With my newfound wealth, I started a charitable foundation to help other people who were being taken advantage of. I funded scholarships, helped small businesses get on their feet, and provided a safe haven for people who had nowhere else to go. I became an unlikely philanthropist, a matriarch who had found her strength, not in money, but in standing her ground. Every morning, I still rise at 6:00 a.m. I still brew my coffee in that chipped blue mug. I still tend to the African violets on the windowsill. But now I do these things not out of habit, but as reminders of the journey that brought me here to a place of purpose, fulfillment, and deep abiding joy. The old woman they thought was fragile and weak was gone, replaced by a woman who had found her strength, not in money, but in standing her ground. Sometimes the victory is simply refusing to be pushed aside. James served 3 years for his crimes. Upon his release, he left the state as required and never contacted us again. I heard he remarried eventually, and I truly hope he found the peace and purpose that had eluded him before. Revenge was never my goal, only justice and protection for those I loved. As for me, I discovered that there is a difference between getting older and growing old. The first is inevitable. The second is a choice. I chose to grow, to learn, to build something that would outlast me. William would have wanted that, a legacy not just of material wealth but of positive change in the world. Every morning, I still rise at 6:00 a.m. I still brew my coffee in that chipped blue mug. I still tend to violets on the windowsill, but now I do these things not out of lonely habit, but as reminders of the journey that brought me here, to this place of purpose, fulfillment, and deep abiding joy. If you found meaning in my story, I invite you to share it. Leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Together, we can keep these lessons alive, reminding the world that dignity never expires, that we are never too old to stand up for ourselves, and that the most beautiful chapters of our lives may be the ones we haven't written yet. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to reclaim your dignity from someone who tried to take it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below.